Hi, Mike Kennedy with you, and we have a subject, but we're going to talk about two aspects of it: ethnobotany and intellectual property rights. Okay? First, ethnobotany. Ethnobotany is the study of how people relate to and use plants. Okay? Usually, this study happens when one culture meets another culture, and they decide to record what that culture that they've met does with plants. Now, of course, when the Europeans came to America, the Native Americans were here, and they started recording some of the things that the American natives did with plants, whether it was for food, for medicine, for building materials. In other words, you can imagine maybe someone's surprised when they found out that the Native Americans were building boats with birch bark, that they were even making maple syrup by boiling it down in containers made of birch bark, that you can make glue out of the oil that's in birch bark, that you can use it. It has some medicinal purposes as well. Well, all these things get recorded, and sometimes some of the plant material, and it gets stored for later research. So now, some people say some of the earlier research that, the settlers, the Europeans did, is notorious for being full of errors. But I guess I can't comment about that because that would take a lot of research to go through different things. But as an example, I got some grief for posting something about jack-in-the-pulpits on a plant forum. Now, jack-in-the-pulpit is a plant that grows and has like a bulb, and I'll put a picture of it at the beginning and the end of this. And the bulb has a high degree of oxalic acid in it. So if you were to cut this thing up and try to eat it, it would like burn your mouth, because that oxalic acid is just a very, very strong taste, and it would be harmful to do it that way. But evidently the literature I've seen, which is just basically some reprints of this researcher who actually went about trying to record what Native Americans were, eating, said that they ate them. And most people today don't consider that a very good food choice. Well, number one, there's not that many of them around in a lot of areas, and it's small, and you have to, of course, kill the plant to eat it. But the point isn't trying to eat it. The point is, in ethnobotany, trying to discover what the relationship was between this plant and people. And it had this oxalic acid also was used as what I would call, also medicinally, as what we call as a counter irritant. In other words, you can buy this Caspian cream. It's a cream that has this component, Caspian, which is what makes red peppers hot, the hot peppers, the chilies, and the jalapenos and things. It's this chemical called Caspian. We can put it in a cream to a certain degree, and you'll actually rub it on your skin, and hopefully it's not going to hurt you. Sometimes it can, but the point is, it confuses the brain, and it says, gee, there's something really wrong in that area of the body. There's an irritant there. We're going to create some of the chemicals that can suppress pain. So the idea, let's just say one was to have some problem with their elbow, they would take this Caspian cream, put it on their elbow, and while they might get a mild sensation from it, if it's just going to work properly, the brain kicks in these anti-pain chemicals, and a person experiences a lot less pain with their elbow. So that's how a counter-irritant works. And evidently, the Native Americans used this jack-in-the-pulpit for that purpose too. And because you can imagine putting this stuff in your mouth is so bad, well, perhaps in a more dilute form, they actually used it on their face to take care of migraines, and on their chest for different things. And so it's kind of that idea that hopefully you would have a level that it wouldn't create more pain than you're trying to get rid of. But the idea is that it this counter irritant theory which the body just says, oh my goodness, there's a problem there. Let's send those endorphins down there to take care of that pain. And then you would experience less pain, even though now if we went to the extreme, you'd put on this stuff and you'd have more pain than you started out with. So that's ethnobotany. Now usually now when we're talking about ethnobotany, we're going into different cultures and we're trying to amass as much information as we can about the plants that they use and taking samples of the plants and doing they can do these kind of scans where they try to find biologically active components in plants. Okay, but the main area would be that, say you would go into this native culture and you'd find their medicine man, their shaman, or whatever you would call them, or just the people and the regular culture that use these native plants, and you would try to find as much about them as possible, how they were used, what they were for, and whatever. And then this thing is taken back into a laboratory situation and it's tested to see whether in fact it has a use or not. Now take like willow bark, okay, from the tree willows. If you take that and seep that, you'll actually get out a natural aspirin compound. It won't be very strong, but it actually can be used to reduce fever, and people did use it for that at one time. It also helps plants root. They use it for a rooting compound. But so that's what I'm saying is that now with my modern pharmacology, usually what we try to do is find a inexpensive, cheaper way to produce the thing. So you hear me talk about wintergreen. Well, wintergreen oil or methyl salicylate is one of those typical kind of rubs you put on yourself when you've got muscle soreness or whatever. And so at one time, you would actually have to, collect all these wintergreen leaves and press the oil out of them and use it. Well, now we can synthetically manufacture methyl salicylate, and I'm sure, if you ever buy a product that has that in it, and you look on your product label when you buy any of these topical rubs, and you're going to usually find that or menthol and a few things, but very often you'll find this methyl salicylate, and that originally was from wintergreen. So now we've got a big push going on because the rainforest is disappearing. People go into these areas where there are still indigenous people or people that have lived there close to the land and still remember the old ways of doing things, and they basically try to pick their minds and gather up whatever samples they can. And the idea here is to hope to find some something really useful, or maybe even a cure to cancer or the common cold or whatever. Now we fast forward a little and we get into what we call intellectual property rights. It's become obvious to some of these tribes and groups of people that these people have come down, gotten their secrets, their techniques, and gone somewhere else and made bunches of money with them. And so there's this little kickback now saying, wait a second, that isn't right. In other words, if we go, let's make up, we go to Brazil and we're on the Andes, the Amazon River, and we go off one track and we find this one tribe, and sure enough, they have a plant that when they get a cold, they eat a leaf and the cold goes away. They haven't found that, but just pretend we do. So then we have a cure for the common cold. Someone comes back and they say, well, we can grow this plant until we can figure out how to synthesize it, and we'll work on synthesizing the active chemicals so we can make it in a pill and we'll stop the common cold. And we're kind of gonna get rich doing it. Well, the question is who legally owns that? In other words, if you discovered it and the knowledge was present in indigenous people, you would think if you had any kind of morals, you would try to compensate those people for this discovery. And we found some of this happening, the idea of intellectual property rights, and it's the same idea between patents in the U.S. I mean, if you're let's just say you're a musician, you write a song, it becomes very popular, I mean, that song is, well, it's copyrighted, but that's the same sort of thing as a patent, which means that people can't use it without giving you some money, something in return. And so the whole idea is that some of these intellectual property rights should also apply to indigenous cultures that have used these plants, and their knowledge is what got you started on looking at this particular plant to give a solution for a problem. One of the plants that has come out, I don't want to say recently, but let's say it's more mainline recently, is stevia. Now, stevia is a leaf. The way we use it, it's a leaf of a plant, and they can extract this substance from it that's like 100 times, or is it 200 times sweeter than sugar, but it has no calories. So this is kind of like a big find. Now, it doesn't taste exactly like sugar. It has kind of an aftertaste. But I think that can be easily hidden in things. And so eventually I believe that all of these unnatural sweeteners, the chemical sweeteners, will be replaced by either the stevia or a compound derived from it that's made synthetically. But the idea is that it appears that the stevia has been used for thousands of years by people in South America, and there's been no ill effects with it. So, I mean, that still needs to be laboratory tested and things, but it appears for what they've done so far, I mean, it's being marketed and sold. But the idea, again, is if someone's making a huge profit off of that plant, does any of it go back to the original people that had the plant and used the plant and told someone else about it? So I'm just saying there's more of this idea of this intellectual property rights. And it's funny nowadays, in the digital world, we kind of tend to disregard copyrights, patents, or this idea of intellectual property rights, because it's so easy to steal information and publish it or reuse it in different things. Music has their own music police, which do a fairly good job of trying to prevent people from using music without compensating the artist. But a lot of other groups don't, like photography and different things like this. And so anyway, what I'm saying is that we in our age don't really respect that much patents, copyrights, and different things like that. If we can, one click and download something and share it with people, we tend to think that that's okay because it was so easy to do. But we don't necessarily realize that we may be breaking the laws that basically we would want enforced if that was the way we were making a living. See, that's the catch-all. Some people will say, well, yeah, I downloaded this, but I never would have bought it because it was too expensive. But you're still deriving the benefit from that software or that program without paying for it, and that pretty much shows you that you're in a copyright or patent violation. So, like I say, it's interesting how this is going to be applied to ethnobotany and how things will change in the coming years, because we're doing this like massive push trying to go into these rainforests that have such an incredible diversity of plants and animals, and we're trying to get every little piece of information and samples of plants and the knowledge that these people have before they're gone, before the people are gone and before the plants are gone. I'll tell you just one case of a woman I knew at church. She was, and I can't remember right now if she was Passamaquoddy or what, but she was a descendant of one of the Native American tribes in Maine. And her grandmother was an actual, what you call, medicine woman. She was the one with the plants and different things. That was the one that people would go to if they had certain, ailments or things, that she would be the one they would go to first as a doctor. And she also talked about having this knowledge of being able to do baskets and things like this. And I kind of talked with her a while and tried to convince her, and she was never really convinced that that information was very valuable, and she could probably make a good amount of money by sharing that information, by whether it was written in a book or something. But even now, if you have baskets that are actually made by Native Americans, even if they're current Native Americans, I'm not talking about ones that lived 200 years ago, but ones that are alive today, and make them in the style that they were made before, they have an intrinsically higher value than, say, a fat old white guy making them. That's just the way it is. But anyway, she never, and that was back before YouTube and all these things. So she didn't really see the value, thinking that could be valuable, that her writing down this information before it was lost was that valuable an asset. But I think it was very valuable. And so anyway, now you know. Ethnobotany, the study of plants and people, and how people relate to plants, how they use plants, whether it's for food, medicinally, building materials, whatever. And then the other flip side of intellectual property rights. In other words, if we discover that, who's does the idea belong to? The people that supposedly discovered it, or the people that have been using it for hundreds of years? I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me, but other people might not. So there you go. Ethnobotany. Bye.